Welcome back to This Is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 138. Today's episode is going to take a look at something that is commonly thought to be a loophole in Magic, a way to get around some staxing type effects, but sadly for the player going against the stax effects, it won't work out in your favor. I've seen this pop up in a few games, and talking about last week's episode with Return the Favor and the cool things that it can do with suspend cards and stuff like that got me thinking about this. So, fans of bonus questions, I've got two of them at the end, and also I've got a new kind of video that I'll be releasing this Friday that I hope you all enjoy. So, here we go. There are a lot of cards in Magic that stop players from casting spells. Some, like Teferi Time Raveler, place restrictions on when you can cast them. Some, like Sphere of Resistance, make them cost more in order to try to maybe stop you from playing them. And then there are others, like the popular Stax commander Lavinia, Azorius Renegade, that care about the qualities of the card being cast. And here are a couple others in order to hurt your eyes for even more, for those of you who don't like to look at Stax pieces like myself. For the rest of the episode, though, we'll stick with one of the most common cards of these kinds that I see, and that is Deafening Silence, which is an enchantment that says each player can't cast more than one non-creature spell each turn. Okay, so your opponent controls the Deafening Silence, and you have a little trick to do multiple things that turn, despite what it says. You begin by casting High Tide, which is an instant that says, until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds an additional blue mana. This, being an instant, is of course a non-creature spell, so that means that the Deafening Silence is now going to be stopping you from casting any further non-creature spells this turn. But it now gives you enough mana to do all the things that you want it to do. It's like casting a morphed Fathom Seer, which is a creature spell when you cast it via morph, so we're not breaking that restriction. Then you turn the Fathom Seer face up by returning two islands you control to your hand so that you can draw the two cards, and turning a creature face up for their morph cost is a special action, so it doesn't use the stack, and isn't a form of casting anything considered to be a non-creature spell. So again, we're not breaking that restriction. Next, you want to get more cards drawn later in the game, so you suspend the Ancestral Vision from your hand, placing it into exile with 4 time counters. Eventually, it will be cast as a sorcery spell, but not now that you're just suspending it. This is also a special action like Morph. It doesn't use the stack, and it isn't a non-creature spell being cast on that same turn that you cast High Tide, so no restriction is being broken. Next, you channel the Sokenzan Crucible of Defiance that's in your hand, which is a land, but you're not casting this land. It's actually an activated ability of the land when in your hand. And because it's an ability, it isn't a non-creature spell being cast to the stack. So, again, no restriction is being broken. Okay, so now is when I tell you that one of these things, in fact, was an illegal game action, and did break that restriction that was applied from the Deafening Silence. Feel free to pause the video and read these cards in more depth to see if you can figure out which one is the culprit on your own. Was it the casting of a morphed creature? Was it the special action of turning a morphed creature face up? The special action of suspending the sorcery? Or the activating the ability of a non-creature card from your hand? There's a saying from a well-known YouTube channel that reading the card explains the card, but this might be one of those many cases in which that is actually not true. Okay, hope I gave you guys enough time. Now, the answer to who the culprit is the suspending of Ancestral Vision. So me talking about suspend earlier in the video may have been a hint, but I hope it wasn't too big of a hint. I hope I talked enough to kind of distract you guys from things. So why is this the case? The answer to that, as always, lies within the comprehensive rules, and we will find in section 702.62 that has a few different subsections in it, and we will be focusing on both the A and C of that. So CR 702.62a says that suspend is a keyword that represents 3 abilities. The first is a static ability that functions while the card with suspend is in a player's hand. The second and third are triggered abilities that function in the exile zone. Suspend end cost means if you could begin to cast this card by putting it onto the stack from your hand, you may pay cost and exile it within time counters on it. This action doesn't use the stack. Now there is a little bit more to it in the comprehensive rules, but it's not important to this video. And so we will see that very important wording in there that if you could begin to cast this card by putting it onto the stack from your hand, and so forth and so on. So yeah, then also the CR 702.62c reaffirms this by saying that while determining if you could begin to cast a card with suspend, take into consideration any effects that would prohibit that card from being cast. So when we look at the reminder text on a card like Ancestral Vision, when it spells out suspend, it lacks these important aspects to its rules. It would of course take up too much room on a suspend card to include all of that information. But yeah, that's just how Magic works, you know? So on to a couple of some bonus questions. Your opponent controls Deafening Silence, and at the start of your turn, you have an Ancestral Vision suspended in exile with a single time counter on it, and you also have an Inevitable Betrayal suspended in exile with a single time counter on it. Its effect isn't too important for what Inevitable Betrayal does, only that it is a sorcery, just like the Ancestral Vision. So when you get to your upkeep, you will have 2 triggered abilities on the stack, each one to remove the final time counter from these respective sorceries, which lets you then cast them for free. So after you pick the order of these and you've cast one of them, what happens to the second one? Does it get countered? Does it just go to your graveyard? Does it stay in exile? Or does it keep its time counter and then wait until the next upkeep when it actually could be cast? Or is it something else, something I didn't mention here? Maybe I'm not including what actually happens. Or is it one of those 4 things? Let me know which one you think, or if you know which one it is. And bonus question number 2. Lavinia, Azorius Renegade, would normally stop you from casting a 5-mana value enchantment like Berserker's Onslaught if you only had 4 lands, but could you use either of the abilities from Joyra of the Gitu or the 11th Doctor to get that Berserker's Onslaught into suspend with time counters on it? Based on what was just covered in this episode earlier when we were talking about this, does the Lavinia restriction stop you from using Joyra's activated ability or the Doctor's triggered ability from getting this Berserker's Onslaught into exile suspended if you only have 4 lands? Or again, does that restriction stop you? So what's the answer? Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta! And again, for anybody that's still sticking around, this upcoming Friday, if I can get the video to render, this is going to be my longest video I've made yet. It's like an hour and 20-something minutes long. I think it was like an hour and 27 minutes or whatever. Kind of a bonkers episode. But yeah, if you guys want to check it out, it's going to be on Friday. And we'll see if you guys want to see more of that kind of content in the future. And yeah, for sure let me know what you think about that episode. All right, yeah. All right, that's it. Ta-ta.